Today, we cancel John Lewis. Not the late congressman, but the UK company which provides home insurance, among other things. The company's been making some headlines, mostly positive headlines, over an inclusive and progressive new advertisement, which features, as so many ads do these days, a young boy cross-dressing. Now, the ad title, we can just play the ad here while I'm talking, so you can see. The ad is titled, "Let Life Happen," and it opens with the boy in what appears to be his sister's room, kind of dolled up in girl clothes with makeup smeared all over his face. And he's got jewelry on, and he's got high heels, and the room is completely trashed and torn apart. And there he is there. And then the boy begins dancing through the house, and at one point he's smearing paint on the walls, kicking over lamps, tearing books off the shelves. He knocks over his sister's paints, and he spills them on the carpet. Towards the end, he throws glitter all over the living room. He starts dancing on top of the table. And then you see at one point his mother is looking on with a blank expression. And then the ad ends with the words, "Let life happen, home insurance." So that's the ad. Now, before we even get to the issue of the boy in the dress, I think there are a number of basic concept problems with this ad. The first is that no insurance company on earth, I can tell you this right now, including John Lewis, I'm quite sure, will cover damage to your home which has been caused intentionally by your bratty child while you sat there and watched. Anyone who's ever dealt with home insurance companies knows that home insurance in general is great until you actually have to use it. Okay, the insurance companies would prefer that you just pay them each month and never actually use the product you've been paying for. If you do dare to file a claim, they're almost offended when you call them up and say, "I got to file a claim." What do you mean you got to file a claim? They'll do everything in their power to ensure that your claim isn't covered by the policy you paid for. There's almost always some fine print technicality, like you call and say that you have a burst pipe, and they'll say, "Well, when did the pipe burst?" And you'll say it happened on Tuesday morning, and they'll say, unfortunately, if the pipe burst on Tuesday between 6:15 a.m. and 8:17 a.m., we can't cover it. That was in your policy. It's unfortunately, we just can't. So my point is that they definitely aren't covering the damage done by your out-of-control son during his impromptu drag performance. Even if they say they will, they won't. But maybe that's neither here nor there. The real point is that the marketing agency that made this ad went out and hired a young boy, dressed him up in makeup and heels, and told him to dance around the house while they film him. Why? Well, because the people behind this ad are a bunch of creepy, disgusting freaks, and like all the other creepy, disgusting freaks who run our culture, they really want your child to be gender fluid. They especially want this for young boys. I mean, when you see this kind of thing in mainstream advertisements for normal, everyday products like home insurance, then you see all the books in the children's section of Barnes & Noble that feature boys dressing like girls, and you see the drag queen story hours and all the rest of it. It becomes quite clear that the promotion of gender ideology has become the priority number one for our cultural overlords. It's the most important thing to them. They desperately want your kids to buy in, especially your sons. So it's interesting to note that the majority of kids who fall into the trap and start identifying as gender fluid or trans are girls. This kind of thing is the most common among adolescent girls these days, and yet it would seem that most of the effort is put into inducting boys into the cult. Why is that? Well, I think girls reach a certain age, right around puberty, when they're especially susceptible to the gender cult. You know, they go through a period of feeling uncomfortable in their own bodies, not at home in their bodies. Boys may have something like that as well, but it's not nearly as pronounced. The gender cult gives girls a framework for understanding these natural and fleeting feelings. The cultists seize on this normal phase of girlhood and use it as a wedge to pry girls away from their true and natural identities. With boys, it would seem the job is harder. Boys have their own bewildering experiences in puberty, but it's not the same. And the feelings of physical alienation within your own body are, again, not nearly as powerful in boys as they are in girls, which means that if the gender cultists want to get to boys, they need to start younger. And they need to be more aggressive. They need to try harder. And that's why it's almost always boys being targeted by these kinds of things, even as girls make up the majority of the kids who ultimately fall victim to it. But the funny thing about this ad is that it actually makes the opposite point from the one that it's trying to make. Because the boy in the ad is immature, out of control, childish, destructive. When left to his own devices, when his mother just sits there and lets him do what he wants, offering no guidance or correction at all, he makes himself and the home into a disaster zone. The boy can't be given that kind of free rein. He needs instruction. He needs careful parental oversight. That's not what the ad is trying to demonstrate, but that's what it did demonstrate. And that's also why you can't let kids choose their own gender, because they lack the maturity and discernment and long-term decision-making ability to determine that for themselves. Of course, nobody can determine it for themselves because biology determines it, but children especially can't be given that kind of power. And so the ad would seem to illustrate that for us quite profoundly and also quite unintentionally. When you as a parent just sit there drinking your coffee, letting your kid live their life without giving any guidance, letting them alone in the dark to fumble their way through without grabbing the flashlight yourself and saying, no, child, this is the way to go. When you do that, this is what you end up with. You end up with a boy wearing drag, tearing your house apart. So, for that reason, although they ultimately made the correct point unintentionally, we still have to say that John Lewis home insurance, and really maybe all home insurance in the end, is canceled. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it. And I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.